into the monthly pay-per-view model. Broadcast from the Onondaga County War Memorial in Syracuse, New York, the show was shorter and cheaper than the Big Five events of the time, representing a dip in the water as the promotion transitioned into a new era. Event overview. The event is often remembered more for its historical significance as the start of the In Your House brand, which would carry the company through the late 90s, than for the quality of its card. Critics and fans generally view it as a decent but uneven show, hampered by a lack of star power, notably missing Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, and Owen Hart. Key matches and reception. Bret Hart vs. Hakushi, widely considered the best match on the card and a genuine contender for one of the WWF's better matches in 1995. It featured excellent technical wrestling and high-flying spots, including a notable springboard Asai moonsault from Hakushi. Bret picked up the win, though he suffered a legitimate knee injury immediately after the match. Razor Ramon vs. Jeff Jarrett and the Roadie. Originally scheduled as a tag match, it was changed to a 2-on-1 handicap match due to the 1-2-3 Kid's neck injury. It was a solid outing that saw Razor overcome the numbers game, eventually leading to a post-match angle involving Savio Vega. WWF Championship. Diesel C vs. Sid. The main event is generally regarded as one of the weaker points of the show. Critics often point to the match as a struggle, noting that Sid required a lot of carrying to make the bout functional. The finish was unremarkable, and the feud failed to generate significant momentum. Bret Hart vs. Jerry the King Lawler, a grudge match that saw Lawler secure a cheap victory following interference from Hakushi. It was a polarizing segment for fans, many of whom were frustrated to see Bret taking a loss on the same night he had already wrestled a grueling opener. The Smoking Guns vs. Owen Hart and Yokozuna, a short, fast-paced tag team title match that suffered from being allotted very little time. It is often cited by reviewers as a what-could-have-been match, as it was well executed but cut too short to reach its full potential. Mabel vs. Adam Bomb, a brief King of the Ring qualifying match that is rarely praised. It is usually described as a skippable, one-dimensional affair. Final thoughts. For the modern viewer, In Your House 1 is a fascinating look at the mid-90s New Generation era. While it lacks the legendary status of the Survivor Series or WrestleMania events of that decade, it provides a clear snapshot of the company's experimental phase. Most reviews place the event in the 2.5 to 3/5 star range, noting that while it lacks a true show-stealer beyond the opener, it remains a meaningful piece of professional wrestling history. As you can The Lumberjacks, July 23, 1995, is widely viewed as a noticeable step up from the inaugural event, largely due to one standout match that many critics consider a highlight of the entire 1995 calendar year for the WWF. Event overview. Held in Nashville, Tennessee, the event leaned into the New Generation style. While it still suffered from the thin roster depth and uneven booking characteristic of that era, the card benefited from a more focused mid-card, key matches, and reception. WWF Intercontinental Championship. Shawn Michaels vs. Jeff Jarrett with the Roadie. This is the definitive must-see match of the show. It is frequently cited as one of the best WWF matches of 1995, featuring fantastic chemistry, high-stakes psychology, and a clever finish involving accidental interference from the Roadie. Michaels' victory here felt like a significant moment in his ascent. The Roadie vs. 1-2-3 Kid, a solid, fast-paced opener that set a high energy for the show. Both men were workhorses of this era, and this match is often praised for being a hard-hitting, technically sound contest that exceeded expectations. WWF Tag Team Championship. Owen Hart and Yokozuna, C, versus the Allied Powers, Lex Luger and British Bulldog. A fun tag match that benefited from the natural pairing of Hart and Yokozuna. While Luger and Bulldog were established stars, the contrast between the heel champions and the babyface challengers provided a classic Clash of Styles dynamic that kept the crowd engaged. WWF Championship Lumberjack match, Diesel C vs. Psycho Sid. The main event is generally regarded as the show's weakest link. While the Lumberjack stipulation added a chaotic visual element to try and mask the limitations of both performers, it failed to elevate the quality of the wrestling. Most reviews characterize it as a disappointing finish to an otherwise decent show. Men on a Mission vs. Razor Ramon and Savio Vega, a serviceable mid-card match that served its purpose to advance the King of the Ring storylines. It wasn't a technical showcase, but it kept the crowd invested. Bam Bam Bigelow vs. Henry O. Godwin. This is widely considered the dud of the night. An abrupt short match that suffered further when Godwin was legitimately injured, forcing an awkward finish. Final thoughts. Most retrospectives place In Your House 2 in the 5/10 to 6/10 range. It is often remembered as a breezy watch that is saved from mediocrity by the Michaels Jarrett masterclass. For fans of the New Generation era, it is a perfect example of how a single high-quality match could save an entire pay-per-view from being a complete disappointment. In the context of your combos and kayfabe project, how do you think the reliance on the lumberjack stipulation in this main event reflects the WWF's booking philosophy at the time? Was it a genuine attempt to innovate, or a sign that they lacked faith in the Diesel Sid program to carry the headline? 3. Triple Header, September 24, 1995, is a notoriously schizoid event in WWF history. It is often cited as the prime example of the creative confusion and booking desperation that plagued the company during the mid-90s. Event overview. Held in Saginaw, Michigan, the show is infamous for its bait-and-switch main event. While the undercard features some of the best technical work of the era, the show is almost entirely overshadowed by a main event finish that frustrated the fanbase and left the company scrambling to fix the storyline on Monday Night Raw the following night. Key matches and reception. Bret Hart vs. Jean-Pierre Lafitte, the undisputed highlight of the night. Despite a nonsensical storyline, Lafitte stealing Bret's ring jacket, the two put on a high-octane, stiff, and psychologically sound match. It is widely considered one of the best hidden gems of 1995, featuring an incredibly brutal bump to the floor by Lafitte. The main event, Diesel and Shawn Michaels vs. Yokozuna and the British Bulldog, advertised as a triple header where the pinfall winner would take the respective champion's title, it was a mess. Owen Hart, one of the champions, was missing for most of the show, leading to the British Bulldog taking his place. The finish saw Diesel pin Owen, who finally appeared. But because Owen wasn't the legal man, the WWF stripped the titles away the next night on Raw, effectively nullifying the entire purpose of the pay-per-view main event. Dean Douglas vs. Razor Ramon, a technically competent match that was marred by a convoluted finish involving the 1-2-3 Kid. It's remembered for furthering the triangle feud between these three, though it often feels like a bridge to bigger things rather than a standalone classic. Savio Vega vs. Waylon Mercy, a fascinating curiosity for wrestling historians. Waylon Mercy, Dan Spivey, was a prototype for the creepy, soft-spoken but dangerous character later popularized by Bray Wyatt. While the match was slow, it is highly regarded for its character work and psychology. British Bulldog vs. Bam Bam Bigelow, a solid mid-card bout that showcased Bigelow's incredible agility. It's a clean, professional match that is often lost in the shuffle of a show people tend to want to forget. Final thoughts. Critically, In Your House 3 sits in a strange spot. If you remove the main event, it's arguably the strongest in-ring In Your House to date, thanks to the strength of the Bret Hart and Razor Ramon segments. However, the sheer incompetence of the main event booking, which essentially told the audience their pay-per-view purchase didn't matter, tanks the reputation of the show. It is generally rated between 4/10 and 6/10, depending on how much a reviewer values good wrestling versus coherent storytelling. Your House 4, Great White North, October 22, 1995, is widely considered one of the absolute nadirs of the New Generation era, and, by many accounts, the worst In Your House event in the company's history. Held in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the event is remembered for a disastrous main event that reportedly pushed Vince McMahon to a breaking point behind the scenes. Event overview. The show was plagued by poor booking, a lack of star power, Shawn Michaels was sidelined due to a real-life altercation, and The Undertaker was absent, and a palpable lack of big match energy. It remains a grim snapshot of a company struggling to find its footing before the dawn of the Attitude Era. Key matches and reception. WWF Championship, Diesel C versus the British Bulldog. This is the infamous main event that essentially killed the crowd and, by some accounts, Vince McMahon's patience with Diesel as a top babyface. The match was an 18-minute struggle that ended in a disqualification after Bret Hart, who was on commentary, interfered. The action was slow and uninspired, leading to an incredibly deflated finish. The legend goes that Vince McMahon was so infuriated by the quality of the match that he threw his headset down in disgust as the show went off the air. The Intercontinental title situation, Shawn Michaels was originally slated to defend his title against Dean Douglas, but due to his real-life injuries, he was forced to forfeit the belt. Douglas was awarded the title by forfeit, only to immediately lose it to Razor Ramon in a match that followed. It's a bizarre footnote that resulted in Douglas having one of the shortest title reigns in history. Goldust vs. Marty Jannetty. This marked the televised debut of the Goldust character. While the match itself was unremarkable, it was a significant moment for the introduction of one of the most unique and enduring gimmicks of the 90s. The Smoking Guns vs. 1-2-3 Kid and Razor Ramon. A tag title match that served primarily to advance the 1-2-3 Kid's slow burn heel turn. While the wrestling was decent, the primary focus was the friction between the partners, which led to the Kid's eventual betrayal of Razor. King Mabel vs. Yokozuna. Often cited as one of the worst matches of 1995. It was a, quote, battle of the giants that resulted in a tedious double countout after only 5 minutes. It featured almost no action, and essentially zero crowd engagement. Hunter Hearst Helmsley vs. Fatu. A relatively solid opener that gave fans a glimpse of the early blue blood persona of Triple H. It is one of the few parts of the show that isn't aggressively criticized in hindsight. Final thoughts. In Your House 4 is largely regarded as a skippable, dismal event. Reviews frequently give it scores in the 1.5/10 to 2/10 range, citing the lack of star power, the lackluster main event, and the feeling of a filler show that was actively harming the product. It's essentially a cautionary tale of what happens when creative booking, injuries, and a struggling roster collide. In the context of your combo season's beatings, December 17, 1995, took place at the Hershey Park Arena in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Coming at the very end of a difficult year for the WWF, the event is generally remembered as a transitional show that was looking toward the horizon of 1996, rather than trying to save the reputation of 1995. Event overview. While not a disaster like its predecessor, Season's Beatings is often viewed as a middle-of-the-road show. It effectively cleared the deck of old feuds and teased new directions, featuring the return of Jeff Jarrett, the debut of the bizarre Santa Claus character, and a main event that reminded fans why Bret Hart was the company's most reliable performer. Key matches and reception. WWF Championship, Bret Hart, C. versus the British Bulldog. This was the anchor of the show and widely considered the best match on the card. As a rematch from their legendary SummerSlam '92 encounter, it delivered a high-quality technical struggle. It served as a reminder that when the WWF focused on pure in-ring ability, they could still produce top-tier wrestling, even amidst a chaotic creative period. The Arkansas Hog Pen match, Hunter Hearst Helmsley vs. Henry O. Godwin. This is perhaps the most infamous segment of the show. It's remembered for its absurdity, an actual pen filled with mud and hogs placed in the arena. While it's often mocked for its gimmick-heavy nature, it is a quintessential example of mid-90s WWF sports entertainment, complete with the visual of Helmsley taking a dive into the muck. The Undertaker vs. King Mabel, casket match. A stipulation match that is rarely praised for its technical execution, but was necessary to finalize The Undertaker's program with Mabel following their previous run-ins. It functioned as a palate cleanser to move The Undertaker toward his 1996 title aspirations. Razor Ramon and Marty Jannetty vs. Psycho Sid and the 1-2-3 Kid, a solid, if paint by numbers, tag team match. The real story here was the subplot involving Goldust, who was positioned at ringside on an elaborate couch, beginning his psychological fixation on Razor Ramon. Owen Hart vs. Diesel, a short match that ended in a disqualification. It felt more like a narrative bridge than a finished product, signaling the shifting status of Diesel as he transitioned out of the main event picture. Final thoughts. Retrospectively, In Your House 5 is regarded as an average, functional show. It sits in the 4/10 to 5/10 range for most historians. It lacks a true dud on the level of the previous event, but it also lacks a show-stopping atmosphere. Its primary value today lies in the breadcrumbs it left for 1996, the rise of Goldust, the return of Jeff Jarrett, and the slow climb toward the Austin/Rock era. As you develop the Rage in the Cage, February 18, 1996, is a fascinating show to revisit because it serves as the final, frantic setup before the New Generation era fully pivoted toward the Attitude Era at WrestleMania 12. Taking place in Louisville, Kentucky, it is a quintessential example of the era's extremes. Some genuinely great in-ring performances contrasted with some of the most bizarre, questionable booking decisions in WWF history. Event overview. The show is often looked back on as a tale of two cards. On one hand, you have high-level professional wrestling that solidified the trajectory of the main event scene. On the other, you have the Crybaby match, which many consider a low watermark for the promotion's comedic side quests. Key matches and reception. Shawn Michaels vs. Owen Hart, #1 contender match. This is the undisputed, must-watch match of the night. It is consistently rated as an excellent contest, often hovering around 4 stars, showcasing the incredible chemistry between two of the best technical workers of the decade. It served perfectly to build the hype for Michaels' journey toward the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 12. WWF Championship, Bret Hart, C vs. Diesel, Steel Cage match. While the star power was there, the execution was widely criticized. The match is remembered for being slow and suffering from a dead crowd. It relied heavily on the escape the cage gimmick, which felt restrictive and anticlimactic. However, the post-match angle with The Undertaker tearing through the ring canvas to drag Diesel down remains one of the most iconic, surreal visual moments of the mid-90s. The Crybaby match, Razor Ramon vs. 1-2-3 Kid. This match is infamous for its ridiculous stipulation: the loser had to wear a diaper. While both men put in high-effort performances that kept the crowd invested, the diaper gimmick is frequently cited by fans and historians as a perfect example of the silly booking that often hampered the company's credibility during this period. Hunter Hearst Helmsley vs. Duke the Dumpster Droz, a mid-card match that is largely remembered as a filler bout. While it provided some screen time for the developing Triple H character, it failed to generate much excitement or momentum. Yokozuna vs. the British Bulldog, a short match that suffered from a flat finish involving interference. It highlighted the company's struggle to find a compelling role for Yokozuna during his babyface transition. Final thoughts. Historically, In Your House 6 lands in the 5/10 to 5.5/10 range. It is a show defined by the contrast between the stellar Michaels Hart work and the plodding, gimmicky undercard. It successfully set the stage for WrestleMania, but as a standalone event, it highlights the frustration of a company that was clearly capable of greatness but frequently tripped over its own creative choices. As you work on 7, Good Friends, Better Enemies, April 28, 1996, from the Omaha Civic Auditorium, is often cited by wrestling historians as one of the most pivotal one-match shows in WWF history. It serves as a fascinating historical bridge. It was the final pay-per-view appearance for both Kevin Nash, Diesel, and Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, before they departed for WCW to form the NWO, effectively ending the New Generation era's top-tier hierarchy. Event Overview. This was the first In Your House to carry an official subtitle, signaling a slight shift toward more defined event branding. It's remembered for being a show where the undercard felt largely like filler, but the main event delivered a classic performance that arguably ranks among the best matches of the 1996 calendar year. Key matches and reception. WWF Championship, Shawn Michaels, C. vs. Diesel, no holds barred. This is widely considered the savior of the event. It was a gritty, high-stakes brawl that utilized the no-holds-barred stipulation perfectly. It is a legendary match for the curtain call era, capturing Michaels at his most motivated and Nash at his most effective. The finish, involving a fake leg and a real sweet chin music, is iconic. It remains one of the most rewatched matches of the mid-90s. Vader vs. Razor Ramon, a strong, stiff match that served as a proper send-off for Scott Hall. It's remembered as a hard-hitting affair that showcased Vader's dominance and gave Razor a respectable final outing on a major show. Ultimate Warrior vs. Goldust, Intercontinental title. This is generally considered the low point of the night. It was a disjointed, 7-minute affair that relied on character antics rather than wrestling, ending in a countout. It is often used by critics as an example of the WWF's struggles to find a meaningful direction for the returning Ultimate Warrior. Owen Hart and the British Bulldog vs. Ahmed Johnson and Jake the Snake Roberts. A functional, well-told tag match that benefited from the natural heat surrounding Camp Cornette. It wasn't a technical masterpiece, but it served its purpose in moving the tag division forward. The Bodydonnas vs. the Godwins, tag titles. A standard, middle-of-the-road tag match that highlighted the presence of Sunny, who was arguably the most overact in that specific division at the time. Final thoughts. Historically, the event is rated highly for its main event, often 4.55 for the main event alone, but receives low marks for the rest of the card. Overall event ratings usually hover around 4/10 to 5/10. It is a must-watch for the main event, but a skip for almost everything else. Given that you are tracking the history of these shows for combos and kayfabe, how does the realization that this was the final WWF PPV for two massive stars like Diesel and Razor Ramon, Beware of Dog, May 26th and May 28, 1996, is perhaps the most bizarre and structurally chaotic event in WWF history. Due to a severe thunderstorm that caused a power failure at the Florence Civic Center in South Carolina, the original May 26 broadcast was cut short, forcing the company to record the remaining matches 2 days later in North Charleston. Event Overview. Because of the do-over nature, the event is essentially a two-part hybrid. The Beware of Dog branding, a reference to the Shawn Michaels vs. British Bulldog rivalry, is often cited as one of the worst event names in wrestling, but the sheer weirdness of the production makes it a cult favorite for wrestling historians. Key matches and reception. Savio Vega vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Caribbean strap match. This is the undisputed highlight of the show, and widely considered a hidden gem of 1996. The intensity, the physicality of the strap, and the high stakes, Ted DiBiase had to leave the WWF if Savio won, made this a career-defining performance for Savio Vega, and a perfect showcase for Austin's burgeoning persona. It is the one match almost every reviewer recommends seeking out. Shawn Michaels, C. vs. the British Bulldog. This match, the reason for the show's name, is often viewed as a disappointment. It was hampered by the live power outage, a dead crowd, and a confusing, simultaneous pinfall finish that resulted in a draw. It's a stark contrast to their better chemistry displayed at King of the Ring the following month. Marc Mero vs. Hunter Hearst Helmsley, a technically solid opener that survived the original broadcast. Mero showcased his high-flying athleticism against Triple H's classic heel work. It's a standard, well-wrestled match that gets lost in the chaos of the show's format. Goldust, C, versus The Undertaker, casket match. A visually atmospheric but ultimately sluggish contest. It is primarily remembered for the interference from Mankind, marking a major development in the Undertaker/Mankind saga, rather than the match quality itself. Vader vs. Yokozuna, a monster clash that largely exceeded low expectations. It was a brief, realistic brawl that benefited from keeping things simple and playing to both men's strengths as heavyweights. Final thoughts. If you look past the production disaster, Beware of Dog is an easy watch, under 2 hours, that hits above its weight class thanks to the Austin vs. Vega strap match. Most retrospective ratings put it in the 0.5 to 0.6 range, but it earns bonus points for being one of the strangest experiments in professional wrestling. As you document these for Combos and Kayfabe, does the fact that this event had 9 International Incident, July 21, 1996, held at GM Place in Vancouver, is remembered as a show that promised a grand international clash, but felt somewhat dampened by the absence of one of its biggest stars and the looming shadow of competition. Event overview. The show was originally designed around a major 6-man tag team main event, featuring the Ultimate Warrior. However, due to a falling out between the Warrior and the WWF, he was pulled from the card and replaced by a returning Psycho Sid. This change, while unexpected, turned out to be a surprising bright spot, as the Vancouver crowd became rabidly supportive of Sid. Key matches and reception. Main event, Camp Cornette, Vader, Owen Hart, and the British Bulldog, versus the People's Posse, Shawn Michaels, Psycho Sid, and Ahmed Johnson. This is the heart of the event, and widely considered one of the best multi-man matches of 1996. It's an energetic, chaotic 24-minute bout that proved Ahmed Johnson could hang in a main event environment and showcase Sid's massive popularity at the time. The finish, involving Jim Cornette's tennis racket, protected Vader as a threat while giving the fans a high-octane ending. The Undertaker vs. Goldust. This match is often discussed more for its bizarre supernatural elements than the wrestling itself. Mankind emerged from a hole in the ring canvas to drag The Undertaker underneath, leading to a disqualification finish. It's a key piece of the Taker/Mankind saga, and a prime example of the theatrical booking that defined this period. Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. Marc Mero. A very solid, clean professional wrestling match that highlights the mid-card quality of the time. Austin was beginning to cement his methodical heel persona, while Mero was still in his prime athletic window. It's frequently cited as one of the most consistent bouts on the card. Mankind vs. Henry O. Godwin. A serviceable mid-card match that is mostly remembered for Mick Foley's willingness to take extreme bumps on the floor, foreshadowing his later high-risk style. The Body Donnas vs. the Smoking Guns. A tag team match that suffered from a lack of crowd heat. It's often highlighted by critics as a low point that underscored the shallow talent pool in the tag division during mid-1996 compared to the rapidly evolving product in WCW. Final thoughts. Retrospectively, International Incident is often rated in the 5.5/10 range. It's widely viewed as an average pay-per-view saved by a stellar main event and a great mid-card match between Austin and Mero. For the modern viewer, it is primarily a historical artifact, a snapshot of a WWF roster trying to reinvent itself after the departure of Hall and Nash, and the instability of top stars like the Ultimate Warrior. In your Combos and Kayfabe analysis, how do you evaluate the sideways pivot the WWF took by replacing the Ultimate Warrior with Psycho? In Your House 10, Mind Games, September 22, 1996, held at the Core State Center in Philadelphia, is widely celebrated as one of the best shows of the new generation era. It is frequently cited as the definition of a one-match show, where the excellence of the main event elevates an otherwise mediocre undercard into a memorable viewing experience. Event overview. This event is anchored by one of the most acclaimed matches of the 1990s. While much of the undercard is viewed as filler, or in some cases, outright skippable, the chemistry between the top stars and the growing tension of the pre-Attitude Era landscape gives the show a unique, gritty atmosphere that fans often look back on with fondness. Key matches and reception. WWF Championship, Shawn Michaels, C vs. Mankind. This match is the crown jewel of the event and arguably one of the greatest matches in WWF history to feature a disqualification finish. It featured a frantic, violent pace that pushed Michaels to a more aggressive style and highlighted Mick Foley's brilliance in selling brutality. The storytelling, culminating in a wild post-match scene involving Vader, Psycho Sid, and The Undertaker emerging from a casket, is often cited as masterclass booking for that era. The Undertaker vs. Goldust, final curtain match. An atmospheric bout that served more to progress the ongoing Mankind/Undertaker rivalry than to deliver a technical spectacle. It is remembered primarily for the theatrical finish involving Mankind, which remains one of the more iconic vignettes of 1996. WWF Tag Team Championship, the Smoking Guns, C, vs. Owen Hart, and the British Bulldog, a solid tag team contest that saw the titles change hands. It was a pivotal moment in the dissolution of the Smoking Guns, planting the seeds for their eventual breakup, and the rise of other tag team dynamics in the coming months. Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. Marc Mero, a clean, professional mid-card encounter that demonstrated Austin's rapid ascent. Mero provided a great athletic counterpoint to Austin's blossoming, methodical heel persona. Mark Henry vs. Jerry the King Lawler, often cited as the low point of the night. It is largely remembered as a clunky, uninspired debut for Henry that failed to capture the audience's interest. Final thoughts. Retrospective reviews typically place Mind Games in the 6/10 to 7/10 range. If you treat the main event as a standalone masterpiece, the show is a 10 out of 10. If you judge it as a full-length broadcast, the filler matches drag it down. It is an essential watch for any fan of 1996 wrestling, serving as a visceral bridge between the technical focus of the new generation and the chaotic, high-stakes storytelling of the upcoming Attitude Era. In the spirit of your combos and kayfabe community, do you think this show 11, Buried Alive, October 20th, 1996, held at the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, is a landmark event that sits right at the junction of two eras. It is notable for being the first WWF pay-per-view in which the reigning world champion, Shawn Michaels, did not have a match on the card, and it is remembered by historians for its high-concept main event and significant technical production issues. Event overview. The event is defined by the first-ever Buried Alive match, which served as the climax of the long-running Undertaker vs. Mankind rivalry. Behind the scenes, the show was marked by a bizarre heel-turn angle for Jim Ross, who experienced genuine microphone/headset malfunctions during the broadcast, issues the WWF played into as part of his character's frustration with Vince McMahon. Key matches and reception. The Undertaker vs. Mankind, Buried Alive match. This is the undisputed centerpiece of the show. While the wrestling itself was secondary to the cinematic, gimmick-heavy nature of the match, it is viewed as a pivotal moment in character-driven storytelling. The visual of The Undertaker's hand emerging from the grave at the end of the broadcast remains one of the most iconic images of 1996. Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. Hunter Hearst Helmsley. This match is often cited by modern fans as a must-watch curiosity. It features the two future pillars of the Attitude Era squaring off before their characters were fully realized. Austin, now using his iconic, glass-shattering entrance theme, was already receiving massive crowd support, and the match is viewed as a high-quality competitive preview of what would become the company's main event scene. Psycho Sid vs. Vader, #1 contender match. A heavyweight clash to determine the challenger for the WWF Championship at Survivor Series. It was a brutal, power-heavy bout that ultimately leaned into the crowd's surprising, intense support for Sid. It's remembered more for the big man spectacle than technical refinement. Marc Mero C. vs. Goldust, Intercontinental Championship. A highly regarded mid-card match that is often cited as proof of Marc Mero's underrated ability during this period. It provided a technical anchor for the show and is frequently praised as one of the more consistent matches of the evening. Owen Hart and the British Bulldog C. vs. the Smoking Guns, Tag Team Championship. A significant match for the tag division, marking the end of the Smoking Guns as a team and the ongoing internal strife within Camp Cornette. It was a functional, solid tag team match that moved the division's narrative forward. Final thoughts. Retrospective ratings for Buried Alive are generally split, usually hovering in the 5/10 to 6.5/10 range. It is widely seen as a necessary show, crucial for its narrative development and iconic main event visuals, even if the surrounding undercard felt like a holding pattern, while the company awaited the return of Bret Hart. Within your Combos and Kayfabe project, how do you categorize a show like this that lacks a world championship?